In my opinion, it's really important that everybody in the car is responsible for keeping that driver focused on the job at hand and not yelling at them, not goofing around in the car. It's not just the cell phone. I say that driving is a team sport and everybody in the car needs to have the focus on getting to the destination safely.
Hello, and welcome to Douglas County School District's Parent University podcast, the DCSD Notebook, where we partner with families to support the whole child every step of the way. I'm your host, Amy Pfister, Community Relations Coordinator here for DCSD. And today we're having an important conversation that impacts every household with a young driver. We know that distracted driving is one of the leading causes of injury and death among teens nationwide. And while smartphones get much of the blame, the reality is that distractions can come from anywhere. To help us understand what really happens on the roads and in emergency rooms, we're joined today by Kathy Myers, RN and Trauma Nurse Coordinator and Injury Prevention Specialist, that's a mouthful, here at HCA Healthone Skyridge, our DCSD Parent University sponsor. Kathy has seen firsthand the consequences of distracted driving and the ways that families can reduce risk. Together, we're talking about what parents need to know and how to have those meaningful and impactful conversations with our teenagers, and how we can all work together to help keep our kids safe on the roads. Let's get started. Kathy, welcome to Parent University, our podcast here.
Hello, Amy. Thank you very much for having me.
You're so welcome. We're so excited. Have you ever done a podcast before?
No, this is my first one.
First one. Well, welcome. I promise it will be very painless.
That's great to know. Thank you.
We'll just kind of dive right in. Can you just provide us with a little bit of context about and in sharing what your role is here at HCA Healthone Skyridge?
Yeah, so I have a varied role at Skyridge here. One of my main focuses of my role is injury prevention in the community. And one of the things I do teach is something called Impact Teen Driving. And this is a class that teaches teens how not to drive distracted. So I'm really delighted to be here today to be able to share some of the information I have to help, families, parents understand how to prevent their kids being involved in a distracted driving crash.
That is a very big role. That's a small role. So as a parent with two kiddos who are currently on the road driving, thank you for all that you're doing to keep all of our kiddos safe and getting that message out there. What motivated you to focus on community education and that outreach related to teens and teen driving?
Well, it's a part of my role. It's part of the requirement for a level 2 trauma center, but I'm very passionate about it because injury prevention is key. I really don't like to see people coming in badly injured into our ER, especially teenagers. And I'm a parent and I have teenage grandchildren now, one of whom has just got his driver's license. And so it's so important to me to be able to do what I can to prevent these kind of injuries. And I've been driving with my 16-year-old grandson and helping guide him on the road to drive safely and not be distracted. So it's a huge responsibility. And I feel that as a parent, as a grandparent, it's really important that we can be involved.
Absolutely. Well, we thank you for all that you're doing in the community to keep kiddos safe on the roads. From your experience, Kathy, what are some of the most common types of distracted driving incidents involving teens?
Well, mostly it's the cell phones, and we're all aware of that. And in January 1st in Colorado, there's actually a new law that was passed. It's called the hands-free law. And it's been very effective. It's illegal for all drivers to be holding a handheld electronic device when they're behind the wheel. And there's serious penalties for this, and that doesn't exclude teens. Teens under 18, if they are caught, holding a cell phone when they're driving, it's a class act infraction, and they initially can get a $50 fine and a point on the license. A second offense is a $100 fine and a point on the license. But much worse than this is the outcomes of driving distractedly. It's not just the cell phones. We're seeing kids that are maybe grabbing a soda while they're driving, eating something while they're driving, or being distracted by their friends. In my opinion, it's really important that everybody in the car is responsible for keeping that driver focused on the job at hand and not yelling at them, not goofing around in the car. It's not just the cell phone. I say that driving is a team sport and everybody in the car needs to have the focus on getting to the destination safely. So really, it's not just the cell phones. One thing about the cell phones I'd like to say, though, is kids, they feel like they can multitask and that they're okay on the cell phone and driving the car and everything. But studies have shown that you're not focused on the job at hand if you're on your phone. It's like a 37% reduction in your brain capacity when you're actually on the phone. And when I'm teaching the impact class to teens, I remind them that, well, what would happen if you answered your phone? You're thinking, oh, it'll only take a second, and you've got bad news. If the text was bad news, you're totally going to be distracted, and there's a good chance you're going to crash that car.
That's such a good point, because it's not just about the phone. It's answering the phone is one part of the equation, right? There's someone on the other line, and so you don't know what message it is that they're sending. And I've never really thought about that, you could be taking a phone call from the car, and maybe it is bad news, and that has a whole other element and layer to distracted driving. Mm-hmm. I was wondering if maybe you had some statistics that you might be able to share about distracted driving, and or whether it's Colorado or nationwide or whatever that might be.
Yeah, I have a bunch of statistics, and sadly they're rather sobering. But nationwide in 2023, there were 2,611 teen fatalities involving a teen driver. And that's per the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And it's known that many of those were due to distracted driving. In 2023, in Colorado, there were 101 fatalities in drivers aged under 20. And once again, many of these were due to distracted driving. We always think it's the drugs and alcohol, but in teenagers, it tends to be the distracted driving is what is killing them. Drivers aged 16 to 19 are nearly 3 times more likely to be in a fatal car crash than those over 20. And AAA did a study, and they discovered that distraction is responsible for 58% of teen crashes. And teens driving with a cell phone are 4 times more likely to crash because cell phones take your mind off the job at hand. Texting is 6 times more likely to cause a crash than being drunk. So the stats are really, really sobering. So we just need to put down those phones and be aware of anything that is going to keep our mind off the road when we're driving.
6 times more dangerous than drinking.
Like a drunk. Yeah,
wow.
Drinking. It's unbelievable. I mean, I've seen people texting and driving, and they're swerving. They're swerving out of their lanes.
Put your cell phones down. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Just to go back a little bit on what you said, because I think that's such an interesting analogy. It is a team sport, right? And if you're a teen, whether you are, driving a sibling or driving with your friends, that's a whole other element that it brings to the car, right?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about that and maybe ways that we as parents or we as friends in the car, easy things that we could do to support our kiddo or our friend that's a teenager that's driving?
I think, especially as a parent, when your teen is learning to drive, to be with them and to be guiding them and setting a good example when you're driving. And, my grandson's been with me for years now in the car, and I always make a huge effort to be setting a good example. And I'm also explaining to him my thought processes when I'm driving and what I'm doing. I make sure that my cell phone is put away in the glove compartment when I'm driving, so I want to set a good example. So just generally, when there are teens in the car and you're the adult, you need to be doing the right thing because they're going to copy you.
Absolutely. Modeling that behavior, not changing the radio station.
Or taking that drink of coffee or something like that is not safe.
Right. And easier said than done in this day and age when our cars are little computers. So much happening and, just even turning the seat warmer, the heat on. You really want to be set up before you hit the road.
Right. That's true. And Colorado, they have the hands-free law, but they do allow some hands-free accessories, things that can be like mounted on the dashboard, things that you cannot pick up and use. But personally, I'm not a big fan of those either, because if it's taking your eyes off the road to look at that map, it is a distraction. So they say they're legal, but I'm not a great fan of those.
Is there a suggestion or a message that you have for how we can empower our kids to do the same when they're driving with their friends and there's maybe a distraction in the car?
I think one of the things that is important is that kids, if they have these conversations with their friends before they even get a car, and that they kind of have agreements that, we are not going to distract each other in a car. It needs to be a culture change. I think kids need to have these conversations before they're even in the car with their friends. I've actually seen kids in my classes make pinky promises with each other that they're going to keep each other safe when they're in a car together. So again, it's a culture shift, being prepared and not waiting until you're in the car and the kids are goofing around or playing the music too loud or fighting over a bag of chips or something like that. These things need to be, the expectations need to be set ahead of time. And I've talked to my grandson about that, and he and his friends, they understand that, again, like I said before, it's a team sport. They're all responsible for not distracting the driver and getting to their destination safely.
I think that's such an important message to really normalize these conversations. And they're not always the most fun, but it's very proactive to have them.
Yes, yeah, I think that makes a massive difference because they know what the expectations are before they're in the car together.
Yeah, and they're that buy-in together.
Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm. They respect each other, they care about each other, and so they plan ahead for safety.
That's great. They're there to protect each other.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Great message. You had talked a little bit about the hands-free law that went into effect January 1 of 2025. Can you talk a little bit more about that law and how that does, maybe some statistics related to that?
Early data has shown there's been an 11% decrease in traffic deaths from January to May in 2025 compared to January to May in 2024. So, we only have early data right now, but it is showing that there has already been a decrease in traffic deaths. So it is being effective.
That's a significant decrease. Mm-hmm. Wow.
And I know that the State Patrol they're doing a lot more citations for people holding their phones when they're driving. So it is being impactful.
That's, just speaking as a parent and also somebody who is on the road, very encouraging to hear that there is that collaborative partnership. And also that the teen is not just impacted with, I think you said it was a $50 fine on their first citation, but then also a point on their record, which if you're a parent, you're probably paying your teen's insurance bill. So that ultimately affects you as well, right? So it's impacting the entire family, which that's how it should be.
One thing that parents really need to know about is the graduated driver's license. And they really need to take that seriously and make sure that they're following the rules for that and supporting their teenagers to follow the rules for the graduated driver's license, and that they're getting the right number of hours, the daytime driving, the nighttime driving, and that nobody's cheating, that everybody is following that accurately, because it is going to make your teen safer on the road and much less likely to be involved in a crash.
Can you talk a little bit more about that program and what that looks like and entails?
It's a 3-phase kind of transition for teen drivers, and they gain experience and confidence, and then they end up being able to have more privileges as they go from the learner's permit through the restricted license into a full license. And parents need to support this, and no cheating, need to support this so that their kids are learning the skills and the safety and the competence that they need before they can drive on a full license.
Which is so important as a parent when your teen is going through that program. Where they are hours 1 through 10 on the road is very different than what they might look like hours 40 to 50, right?
That's true. We compare that with learning a musical instrument. I'll talk to kids about their graduated driver's license, and I ask them if they play a musical instrument, and most of them raise their hand, they play something, and I'll ask them, and how good were you playing that flute when you first began? And they say, pretty terrible. And I say, it's the same with driving. You need that experience before you are going to be competent at it.
Absolutely. That's such a great analogy that I think there's this expectation that because they've probably been exposed to being in a car as a passenger for years and years, that maybe it's going to be intuitive, and they know that, oh, I can't wait to drive. I'm going to be so good at it. It's very different when you're actually the one behind the wheel. So that's a great analogy that you share. Kathy, from your perspective in healthcare, how does adolescent brain development play into decision-making behind the wheel?
Well, we know that adolescents' brains take a long time to fully mature, like into their early 20s. So it's really important to understand that they might not be making the wisest decisions. So we need to support them and guide them to make sure that they're doing that until their brains are fully developed.
which you were saying is around the age of 25. Is that?
21 to 25, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah. It can take a while.
So
the frontal lobes are still forming.
So it's really important that we as parents meet them where they are.
Yes, that's a good point, and that we don't have unrealistic expectations of them.
Sure.
And give them chances to give them second chances when they're learning.
Such a great point, because it's hard to be a teen in this day and age.
I think so.
So really kind of meet them where they are and support them, let them fail forward a little bit. I love that. I wanted to ask you, just because we hear this a lot, more and more teens aren't comfortable getting their license right at 16 years old, and some kids are waiting longer to get their license. Are you seeing that, or are you hearing that?
Yes, I am actually. And I don't have any stats about it, but I just anecdotally, I'm hearing those kind of conversations. I think some kids are afraid to get out there. The stats are sobering. I mean, there are a lot of teen deaths. And I think the kids are hearing that. They know how dangerous driving is. And I think many of them are afraid to get behind the wheel.
Absolutely. What are some suggestions or maybe conversations that parents can have with their teenager if they're not comfortable getting their learner's permit or ready to get their license?
That's a really good question, because I am hearing that some kids are putting it off because they are afraid of driving on the roads, because some of the stats are sobering. But I think it's really important for parents to support their kids and help build their confidence. Having conversations when you're in the car, such as when I was driving a lot with my grandson, and just trying to guide him as to, how to drive safely, leaving lots of distance, abiding by the speed limit, things like that. And I think that it helps give them some confidence that they can learn to drive safely. And then you start small. You start driving in on the back roads, in the parking lots. You just kind of ease them into it gradually so that they can build up their confidence.
To your point, nobody is an expert driver on day one. We could all be better. We all make mistakes every day. So just to kind of level that playing ground for our kids,
Absolutely. And certainly for me, learning to drive in America on the other side of the road, that was a bit of a challenge.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I bet that was.
Yes, I was not an expert.
I bet that was.
Yeah.
Based on the work that you do, Kathy, in the community, are there any safety tips or messages that are helpful to share with teens?
Yes. One of the things I am noticing, which is really good news, is that most kids are wearing their seatbelts. But I would like to emphasize that they need to continue wearing their seatbelts. It seems to be sometimes the parents are not as good about it, but the kids are getting that message, which I think is really fantastic. Another important message I would like to share is that we need to be using the word car crash and not using the word accident. Because if we use the word accident, it implies that these things just happen, versus we have control over preventing these car crashes from happening. So we need to change our verbiage and be using the word crash.
That's a really interesting point. I think just in thinking about it, as I was hearing you say it, crash has a different connotation.
It certainly does.
So yeah, great point. How can we as parents encourage our teens to speak up as passengers, maybe when they don't feel safe in a car?
That's a really great thought. And one of the things is kids actually having the confidence to speak up to their parents, because sometimes parents are not setting the best example. They might be, grabbing their phone for directions, that kind of thing. So kids need to feel empowered to be able to speak to the parents. And one of the things I tell them in the class I teach is speak to your parents about, how everybody wants to get there safely, and that you love each other and you all want to get to your destination safely. So kids, I encourage them to speak to their parents politely, but ask them to, put down the phone, put down that coffee.
And I love that so much too, is allow our kids to hold us accountable.
Yes, indeed. Yes. And not get defensive if your kid is asking you to keep everybody safe.
Right. Because we have to model behavior that we're expecting them to model themselves when they're in the car with a friend. So if that's a great point. If they can hold us accountable, then they might feel more empowered to hold their friends accountable.
That's a very good point.
I love that. Do you, Kathy, have a suggestion, or could you maybe recommend a community program or resource, like Parent University, that can help families build safer driving habits? Do you have a suggestion?
Well, they can definitely go online and look at the Impact Teen Driving webpage. There's lots of fantastic resources there. There's videos, there's competitions, there's lots of great resources for families on that website. And I know a lot of fire departments will teach some safe driving skills. They have obstacle courses and things like that kids can do to prepare them for like winter driving, that kind of thing.
That's great. And we'll link those resources out in our show notes to this episode so that it's kind of a one-stop shop for parents. Yes. Are there any things that you hear when you're out in the community and teaching these classes from teen drivers or future teen drivers that are misconceptions or things you want to dispel or inaccuracies, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, most kids are wearing their seatbelts, which is great. But I've actually had some kids say that they refuse to wear a seatbelt because they feel that if they don't have the seatbelt on and they're in a car crash, that they're going to be thrown clear of the car and they think they're going to land in soft grass or something and be uninjured. But that's not the case. If somebody's ejected from a vehicle, that means, going through glass or being partially ejected from a vehicle. And so then, vehicles, they roll and there's metal, there's glass, and the consequences can be, absolutely devastating. So kids have to understand that the seatbelts are holding them in a seat for a reason. And parents also have to understand that they need to model wearing seatbelts and over the shoulder too, not just across the lap. They need to be on properly.
That's a great point, and interesting that in this day and age that's still...
Yeah, seatbelts save lives. Seatbelts can cause injuries, but those injuries people will recover from. Whereas if you're not wearing your seatbelt and you're thrown through that windshield or, partially ejected from the car, those are life-threatening injuries. And, we do see many deaths from that kind of injury.
Yeah, and that was a question that I wanted to ask. And just within your role and being a trauma injury specialist, without going into graphic detail, what are you seeing? This is... Parent University is meant to be a tool and a resource for parents.
Yes.
So that they feel empowered to have sometimes the hard conversations with kiddos. What are you seeing on that front?
Well, we really, as trauma nurses, as physicians, we're looking at something called mechanism of injury. So that is understanding when somebody's involved in a car crash, kind of like the physics that are going on, the direction of impact, whether or not that car is rolling or, where how the body is impacted. Are they hitting the windshield? Are they hitting the steering wheel? Are they being T-boned from the side and getting left-sided injuries or from the rear? It's all to do with the how the physics of the crash occur and the speed of the crash. It's when we get the ambulance report and we know a patient's coming in, whether it's a teen or an adult, we are thinking about the mechanism of injury. And this is so that we know how to prepare for that patient as they arrive in the trauma bay. The EMS give us a report and kind of give us like a little bit of a picture, of what to anticipate for the patient so that we know what to get ready to treat them appropriately and to give them, immediate life-saving care. If we can kind of have a picture painted ahead of a time, we know how to prepare for the patient and then give them the right kind of care that they need.
Sure. Yeah, I can't even imagine. That's just not a world that I live in, but so grateful and thankful for you and those that do what you do.
I would really like to give credit to the ED staff. They're the ones that are in the trenches, in the thick of it day after day, and they do a really fantastic job.
Sure. There's so many distractions out there, and cell phones just being one of them, right?
That's correct. And I really feel that our roadways are not always designed for safety in that respect. So, for example, when I'm driving up and down like Santa Fe, for example, there's a lot of billboards. And the billboards are designed to be, very kind of attractive and they distract you, So it's really important to remain focused on the road and have that discipline to be focusing on the job at hand and not by the distractions around you.
Sure. And there's a million distractions out there for us as adults. So we're asking 16-year-olds to tune out something that we struggle to tune out.
Yes, that's right.
Easier said than done.
It is indeed.
Yeah. Well, I want to be mindful of your time, and we're so appreciative of this conversation that's so important. One last question. If you could tell every parent one thing about preventing distracted driving, what would it be?
I really think it would be the parents have to set the example because quite often they don't. I think that's going to be the key thing because as we know, kids are modeling our behavior from when they're very tiny for the rest of their lives. So you need to set the example as a parent. and you drive safely, and they'll hopefully follow in your footsteps.
That's a great message and just a great reminder in general.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your time, and thanks for interviewing me on this very important topic. I'd like to keep everybody safe.
Absolutely. Well, we're so grateful. Thank you so much for joining us today, and what an important message. I'm not sure that there's a more important one, quite frankly. So thank you so much, Kathy, for sharing your experience and insight on today's episode. Again, we'll link all of the resources that were discussed today in the show notes. A big thank you to HCA Healthone Skyridge for their continued partnership and Parent University, our podcast. You heard it here, distracted driving is preventable, and parents play a powerful, if not the most important role. Whether it's having those ongoing conversations, modeling good habits and behavior, or setting those clear expectations, those small actions can truly save lives. Together, we can all help our kids make safer choices on the roads and arrive home safely every time. Thank you for listening to our DCSD Parent University podcast. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and share it with a friend or a fellow parent of a teen driver. And we'll see you next time here at Parent University.